Welcome to the Stubborn Love Podcast. I'm your host, Paige Bond. I'm a Gottman and attachment trained, solution focused marriage and family therapist. I specialize in helping folks design and build their dream relationships through structured therapy and resources, and also use modalities that go beyond traditional talk therapy, like accelerated resolution therapy and psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. School didn't teach us how to be good at love, so I created the Stubborn Love podcast to help you navigate it. Every episode has actionable tips that will help you create a happier, healthier, and more fulfilling life with the people you love. Join me on this journey of love and learning for the stuff they didn't teach you in relationship school. Welcome to another episode of Stubborn Love. I'm excited. I have Serena here today, who I actually met in grad school. We probably have so much more to talk about there with that. So I've known Serena for quite a bit of time. And what's so cool is Serena specializes as a trauma-informed psychotherapist and relationship educator and specializes in helping LGBTQ plus, kink, and non-monogamous communities. What's really awesome about that is helping them heal attachment wounds and create fulfilling relationships. So today we are going to actually be talking about some really cool topics of attachment trauma, parts work, what the heck those two things are, and how Serena uses both of those to really make some magic happen for their clients. So, Serena, thank you so much for being here today. I'm really excited for this conversation. What I would love to do is just have you introduce yourself to the audience, kind of talk about how you even got involved into the mental health field and how you ended up specializing in particularly this population.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks so much. I am excited to be here as well. Good to see you again as well. I am Serena Yeager. I'm a licensed mental health counselor, serving people across Florida in person in Ware Park and virtually. And I do specialize in trauma-informed care, specifically for LGBTQ plus individuals, non-monogamous folks, and people who practice kink as well. So yeah, I found that arts work is a really great way to go into attachment trauma. But maybe also I should probably talk about what that is. I don't know what the background is here.
Yes. So I always love to, because I don't know where my listeners are. Like
Yeah,
sometimes they're further along in their educational journey. Sometimes this might be the first episode that they ever listen to on this podcast. So could you actually talk about and explain like parts work and attachment trauma? Start with whatever you would like to, though.
sure, sure. Attachment trauma is a type of developmental trauma that happens over the course of your early life, typically. Sometimes people will think of trauma as maybe a one thing happened. You were in a car accident or something happened to you. And like that's the thing that made me traumatized and I'm having this reaction to. But I found that actually a lot of people tend to have a number of things that you can't really point to one particular instance of what happened over the course of your lifetime. Maybe you were abused by parents or even just had a neglect of some kind, a lack of care and attention that stuck with you. So some people will develop an insecure attachment style based on receiving some sort of abuse or neglect in childhood. Maybe they're more anxious in their relationships moving forward, or more avoidant in their relationships moving forward, or some sort of combination of these. It's something that people come into my office with quite often, where they have difficult relationships, and that's kind of where they find, oh, maybe I do have some trauma here, some patterns here that need to be unlearned. Um, in relationship counseling, but also in individual as well. You know, someone's coming in and they're saying, I am opening up my relationship and I didn't know how difficult it is for me to feel safe with another person or having a real honest conversation with them about how I'm feeling or what my needs are. So that's where we come on into like a lot of healing from attachment trauma. And if someone's coming in and they don't have a lot of attachment trauma or they've healed from it, they might have a secure style where they feel pretty okay, pretty safe, connected, able to work through conflict effectively, things like that. that's kind of where a lot of people I work with are really doing a lot of their work in therapy. Parts work is a way to do that in a less like intellectualizer style.
I've been seeing a lot of that on
Yeah,
TikTok where people will go to their therapist and their therapist says, "You're doing this, this, and this. I don't know why you're coming to therapy. You're so
right.
smart." So, can you talk about what the intellectualizer is? And I'm so
Yeah.
excited that this helps with that side.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So the intellectualizer, yeah, yeah, like you're saying, has really great insight. Yeah, I know I have a list of things. I come into therapy. Here's my to do. And yeah, I already know that I have a difficult relationship with my parents or I have some self-esteem stuff and I can just tell you that, but like, right. So as a lot of people go,
What
right,
now?
exactly. Like what do I do with this? Right. I know there's something that I need to change, but I don't really know how to do it. And I'm so caught off guard by any sort of like feelings work. And I'm so disconnected from my body that it's hard to really even engage in the moment. Yeah. So if if coming in and just sort of talking through and doing talk therapy, maybe cognitive style, CBT, something like that, is one way of engaging with this stuff. Another way would be more of a addict or body based approach, and that's where parts work comes in. So I'm trained in internal family systems, and the idea is that there's kind of like a ecosystem of sub personalities in your head. There's parts of you that are protective, other parts, there's parts of you that are hidden away and maybe are kind of nursing these developmental wounds that you might have. And instead of coming in and saying, all right, let me just tell you what I want to change, or let me just kind of talk through, or say, let me replace these thoughts by just kind of thinking it out. It's more about getting in touch with your body and with your feelings and using a bit of metaphor and symbolism and kind of different states of mind to really engage with that.
I'm thinking of this on the fly, but could I come up with like a case study for you example of like how you might handle that?
Yeah,
So let's say I'm coming in to see you specifically because my last therapist, they were just like, "You're too good for therapy. You don't need to be here. You're too smart and nothing I could do for you." So I find you and you tell me about parts work and I tell you, I'm feeling really anxious in my relationship. I feel like the problem all the time. I feel like I can't do anything right. And I'm like always riding the edge thinking my partner might leave me. How would using parts work help that? And, like, what would you be doing?
yeah, yes, that's a great example of sort of thing. See a lot of where if you're already really anxious, you're like, I know logically that I'm okay, but like my body is sending all these signals out. I'm getting muscle tension. I'm getting heart rates up. I'm getting kind of this fight or flight stress response reaction. Um, Step one is to identify that reaction because some people are so caught off from those feelings at all that they're not even aware of how activated they are, and and maybe identifying that as a part of you or as a sensation, emotion, reaction located somewhere in the body is a good place to create a better relationship to that response. So like yeah, maybe there's a scared part that says if I don't respond correctly to my partner or say the right thing all the time or what have you, I'm gonna be alone and that feels like death. That feels like the end of all things. Like my nervous system could be saying like, all right, we have to respond to this threat by going into like a reaction. And maybe that would be a protector that's coming up and saying, okay, we have to whatever the coping skill is or whatever the defense mechanism is, right? Like we have to people please, we have to perform, we have to yell to be heard, we have to remove ourselves. All of these kind of stress and trauma reactions are protected parts that maybe are saying, don't look at this hurt part over here that really feels unlovable or alone or unacceptable or whatever is the burden is. Mapping it out like that is like, okay, maybe there's a few different roles here that are all interacting with each other, and you can feel that reaction in your body. And then also, hopefully, once we get that to step back, that protected part to step back, we might be able to really communicate with that hurt part or that exile that was separated out because at some point you felt unaccepted.
I'm wondering when you mention these certain parts, is it really like based in shame or these negative core beliefs that people just think about themselves? So like the I'm unlovable, I'm not good enough, I will never be a good partner, like all of those things. And the protector part, maybe protecting the person from like facing their shame head on because like that's intense, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Definitely. There's a lot of that. Yeah. It feels like you can't look at this. We're going to keep you away from it. And that's another reason why I think going that kind of like a cognitive approach isn't always helpful, because sometimes the the protective mechanisms and the shame and everything else will just throw up a wall and won't really let you get back there unless you're very respectful and willing to kind of like dialogue with it. And when we are in a session, like with clients, I will actually have them kind of meditate with me, or at least kind of connect with their bodies in the moment where they can. It's sort of like almost like a brain state sometimes, where you can ask a part to step back, or you have its permission to talk to something deeper, and then you just kind of feel it click. It's really hard to explain.
This sounds so cool and fun, and I know we're trained in different things, but I feel like there's so much overlap between using what I use for trauma with accelerated resolution therapy, like having people like sort of dive into the subconscious or unconscious. It sounds like what
Yeah,
this allows you to do in that work, right?
it's very, very similar to that. Yeah. I actually just got trained in that over the summer too. So it's been kind of cool to start to put these together.
Oh,
Uh,
so cool.
yeah. But in ART, there's a lot of that. Your brain is going to know exactly what it needs to do in this moment. And we're just kind of here to guide you through that process, and the images will come up, things like that. And so when you're doing when I'm doing parts work with clients, I really don't know what they're going to see. And sometimes they might have kind of like an image in their mind, or maybe it's more of like a sensation or something else. But like if we get to the point where we've we've built a lot of trust over time, and done a lot of work to kind of get back in the body, they might be dialoguing with like multiple levels here, and maybe it's like, oh yeah, that exile is at the end of a long hallway and locked behind the door. And I'm like, oh, okay, what if you sent it a letter? And then they internally can kind of like feel that happening, and it's really cool to see it. But then maybe it's like, okay, well, we have this ongoing relationship now where we can actually check in and ask that part, okay, what do you need from me? What is there, something that I can offer you, or is there any sort of updating that needs to be done? Sometimes the parts don't really know that you're safe in this moment, or that you are the age that you are now. A lot of times this is maybe a really young part, like a childlike part, who thinks, okay, I'm very much out of control, out of power, and I need to be protected. Like,
Mm,
yeah,
mm. I can see how that could so like easily connect to like attachment trauma showing up in the room when and playing out maybe in their relationship and feeling really triggered in situations where maybe the situation itself doesn't set you up for it, but because of the trauma when they were younger,
Yeah.
that's what happens, and definitely needing something like parts work to be able to, like, make that kind of connection. I hope you're enjoying this episode. I want to take a moment to invite you to sign up for my free attachment dynamics workshop. I have partners use this as a foundation before we get started in relationship therapy. By watching this, you'll learn how to recognize negative communication patterns, understand how power dynamics show up in conflict, and most importantly, discover ways to turn conflict into opportunities for deeper emotional connection. And the best part, this is free for you. Make sure to head to pagebond.com or hit the link in the show notes to access it for free. Now let's get back to the episode. So you've mentioned a couple of different parts, the protector, the exile, and I think that there's even more than that. Can you touch on the others that show up?
Yeah. Projectors are also usually broken up in a couple different types. So there's managers and there's firefighters. Um, Managers want to control things. They want to keep things really predictable or prevent bad things from happening to the exile. And the firefighters more like, okay, we are going to, yeah, put out the fire. We're going to just kind of really whoosh up and get get the reaction in the moment to get you out there, basically. Yeah. So that could look like a lot of different things for different people. I like the map of the different trauma responses as parts. So maybe there's a fight part, a flight part, a freeze part, fawn part, and then I've also seen if you map it out, there's like the attachment cry part that'll come up.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah,
Okay, tell me what the attachment cry part is.
yeah. When you're a small child, you don't have the ability to care for yourself or really even communicate and ask for things. So the most primal basic communication that we have is pretty much this like crying out, like I need something as a caregiver and a parent or another adult in the area. And this is actually a very developmentally appropriate and helpful thing. In adults, that looks more like a request to your needs or things like that. But if it's something that maybe wasn't met, if you have this kind of truncated attachment cry, that's where you get some of these developmental traumas coming in where, okay, I'm either going to not speak up at all because I know that it's pointless to let people know what they need, that they won't get those needs met. It might make it worse, punished, or something similar to that. So a lot of people will have this part come up where maybe if you've been traumatized, it can look more like, okay, I'm going to either really try hard to make you listen to me, or I'm going to not speak up at all. So that's a part that can come up and maybe causing issues potentially in a relationship where this person doesn't know how to get their needs met. They might not even know what their needs are or how to communicate them.
This is so interesting. I haven't heard of attachment cry, so I mean, this is why I do the podcast. I love being
Yeah.
educated. So thank you so much for like going into that. Thinking about how this shows up as attachment trauma, I'm wondering how like partners back at home who like when you're doing individual work, how might you help like your clients, since if you're seeing them individually, you only have them in the room. How might you be able to help them also help their partner understand all of this and, like, actually help the relationship? Because it's not only the person going through that attachment trauma, like, they need a partner or more that is going to be supportive to help them through this process. So,
Yeah.
what do you do about that when you're working one-on-one only?
Yeah. That's a really great question. Ideally, they would also be working in relationship counseling. In perfect world, you'd have at least 3 sessions a week, one for yourself and your your partners and then the relationship. But sometimes I'll end up kind of walking them through understanding what's going on in themselves in a way that maybe they can hopefully explain it to a partner and say like, all right, it's not personal. There's something happening in me that maybe is actually more to do with something that happened in the past than anything that's actually happening in the moment right now. So sometimes that can help to make it a little less personal, but then also we work on some of the coping skills to keep them able to to stay present and stay connected and stay within that window of tolerance so they're not triggered as much. And I don't know if any of that is even common knowledge yet or not.
It lands for me, but I'm in this field. So can you actually explain what the window of tolerance is to the audience?
Yeah. In the nervous system, and I kind of touched on this before with the different stress responses, but there is it's kind of like a series of levers. There's sympathetic arousal, and then which will kind of bump you up into like the fight or flight response. And then there's parasympathetic arousal deactivation that will kind of bring you back down. If you go into dorsal, it's more of a shutdown state, and that's very fine, pretty fun. But basically, there's something in the middle of like your optimal state where you're calm, you're connected, you're able to communicate, you're in the present moment. I've heard it called rest and digest. And that's what we call the window of tolerance. It's when you're either in that space most of the time or kind of bumping up out of it and then back down under it. In an appropriate way. Like, okay, I'm kind of stressed about this thing and I'm getting activated, but then I'm able to kind of calm myself and come back down into it. Or I'm feeling maybe like I need to kind of shut down a little bit. But yeah, it's something that if you're feeling if you're feeling triggered, for most people that's gonna be I'm activated out of this state. And maybe I am very, very stressed or I'm argumentative or I'm afraid and I need to remove myself or I'm shutting down, that sort of thing. This can feel very overwhelming because it's a nervous system response. It's the body responding to a perceived threat in your environment as if you're under attack. And a fight with a partner can be really stressful, but it's also a lot of times it's necessary to really come back together and have that repair afterwards and have that constructive conflict and things like that. We're we're often working on trying to help them stay calm enough that they're not getting getting flooded by these stress responses. And maybe that looks like doing some sensory-based coping skills. I could do a lot of, what your environment helps you feel more centered. Is that like certain movements? Is that certain smells? Is that certain temperatures of ice water, things like that? So we're really trying to figure out like, okay, when you are in that heightened state, something about this interaction is setting off something from the past or reigniting some of that traumatic stress. Like, what do you need in that moment? And sometimes that's a coping skill. Sometimes that's like, I need a 10-minute walk and just to kind of get out there and use up some of this activated energy, that sort of thing. But overall, we work on trying to develop these skills so that they can regulate their emotions a little bit more effectively and hopefully kind of come back and have this constructive conflict with their partners.
Yeah, and ideally, the partner that you may not be working with in this
Mhm.
scenario is gonna be willing to have those harder conversations, but since this is life and life doesn't always give us the most ideal situation like that, I'm kind of curious. I'm sure you see this in your practice because I see it all the time where the partner who thinks they're the problem in the relationship, so we'll keep running with this anxious person example. What do you do when they're coming to see you? They're working through these attachment wounds. They're showing up for the parts work, yet their partner is still pointing the finger and saying, "You're the problem, fix it. I'm not going to reassure you. You shouldn't want," like, really basically, like, negating all of the attachment needs that they're trying to get met. So, what do you do in a situation like that? Because 'Cause I'm sure that triggers the attachment wounds to be even deeper.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. And I see that all the time, and especially if this hypothetical scenario, we're talking about someone who is identifies with an anxious attachment and maybe they're with a more avoidant partner. You get kind of this chase dynamic where the more they pull away, the more I chase, and now okay, now I'm even more anxious, and they're more upset with me, and then we just kind of move from there. I think part of that is boundary work. And oh yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
yeah, because otherwise, if this person is depending on what the trauma is, maybe they've heard their entire lives that you're too much, right? Or having any needs at all is actually some sort of inconvenience to everyone else. Yeah, or you have to earn affection and attention even a little bit. I really try to reinforce my clients that it's not just one person who is at fault, or we're not looking to blame one person the other person, even if one of you is having a visibly harder time and maybe is even having panic attacks or things like that. We're looking at a dynamic, and the client has their piece and their partner has a different piece, and then there's kind of like a, a system in place between the two of them, and maybe that's a different piece entirely.
Mhm. I'm so glad you're speaking to that because I think oftentimes we so often get into this place where we're working one on one with this person, and then we can, as therapists, maybe feel stuck because the other partner is not looking at their contribution to that dynamic. And I'm really happy you brought up boundaries. I don't think that's talked about enough in attachment work. And because I think when people hear boundaries, it's like, "Oh, you gotta push people away or have a barrier," and, like, I think we have so much, like, I don't know, like, where people are getting this idea, but we have so much that we're up against, I think, as therapists of, like, re-educating and, like, offloading some of those, like, unhelpful messages about what boundaries are. So can you sort of talk about if we're working one-on-one with someone in that dynamic and we're working through attachment trauma and using parts work, how would we set up individual boundaries for protecting those parts that we're trying to care for more?
Yeah, yeah. As far as that goes, I mean, I think some of that is not taking on all of the responsibility. Like, okay, my boundary might be that I'm not going to um, people please as much in this scenario where I'm just like, all right, let me figure out how it's all my fault. That could look like separating yourself from a partner, but it doesn't obviously have to. But saying, okay, this traumatized part of me, this hopefully trying to create a more caring relationship with and really show care and consideration for, a boundary could be like, all right, I'm going to to really show that part compassion. And maybe that looks like, nope, taking some time separately, or saying, okay, I'm not going to spend as much time prioritizing people or situations where I can't make requests or have needs or express those needs.
Ooh, that's a really good I love that boundary so much. Yeah, because why are we prioritizing people who aren't letting us prioritize ourselves and our needs? Oh, that's so good. Thanks for going down that route with that. I know that was, like, way off script for, like, what we were talking about today, but I thought, like, I had to catch ya.
Yeah, it's all very connected, and it's interesting to really see all the different threads and trying to put trauma therapy with relational or with attachment trauma, with developing a relationship to your body and to your psyche. I think it's an approach that you kind of have to do all together.
Yeah, yeah, comprehensive. Just if you do one, there might be parts missing. Yeah, yeah. One other thing that I wanted to touch on before moving into a different kind of vibe here is I wanted to talk about, like, in polyamorous relationships, a lot of themes that can show up, maybe jealousy, comparison, struggling with, like, finding time, prioritizing time, and I'm curious if we may be able to, like, pick one of those or just something else on your mind and talk about how to work with that in the attachment trauma work and the parts work that shows up, because all of that can be highlighted, especially if maybe we're formed as a monogamous relationship and then transitioning into a non-monogamous one, and now we may not have that, like, protection, like, pseudo protection, I have air quotes on, but that protection of, like, "Oh, like, everything's fine. There's no one to compare myself to, or there's no one to be jealous of, or there's no one to be," but now here we are, like, intentionally doing that dynamic. So, I'm so curious on your thoughts, how you might work with that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, so many thoughts on that.
I know.
Well, and especially if we're talking about, okay, so specifically in the monogamous couple that decides to open their relationship, I think some of their security typically has come from kind of knowing what the script is, and maybe not even ever really talking about what the expectations are, or how do we meet each other's needs, because there's kind of a cultural understanding of like, okay, we date and then we go study and then maybe we then get married, get the house and have kids or what have you. Or there's the relationship escalator that you can kind of depend on, or as you just touched on, you kind of a different category than other people. So maybe you can reassure yourself that you don't really have to compete. And yeah, the air quotes around all of that too, because you know that just because you're in a monogamous relationship doesn't mean that you're securely attached and have a really solid connection or anything like that at all. Um, but a lot of times I see people, especially making that switch, suddenly they have more opportunities for those insecure or traumatized parts to be activated. Maybe that's the jealousy, maybe that's feeling unloved, or some sort of other conflict that, now you have more chances to really touch on, because it's a completely new scenario. The dynamic is not as clear cut. There's not as much of a script, and you're having to have these really hopefully deep, honest conversations about what you really want, what you're interested in, and what you could actually commit to each other, and how do we want to construct this together? What style or structure of non-monogamy you want to? Yeah. So there's a lot more opportunities to feel insecure.
Yeah. I think that speaks to just how much we may be fooling ourselves in monogamous relationships of, like, just skating by or covering up attachment wounds when really there might be, like, some healing work to be done. I'm curious, I know that we've sort of touched on, like, window of tolerance and, like, what are some things that we can do for, like, coping skills. Are there any other self-help practices to explore our own internal parts that you recommend doing?
Yeah, that could look like a lot of different things. Some people will do either guided meditation work. There's a lot of parts work practitioners that will kind of guide you through some of this internal mapping, or help you kind of interact with and speak to these parts. But also anything you could do to really come back to that window of tolerance, it's probably going to look like, or it's often going to look like completing the cycle. If you're trying to speed up, and anxiety often is like a flight part. Sometimes you might even like need to run, for instance. Your body.
Get it out of your system.
Yeah. Yeah, because your body is reacting like it's literally about to run away from a wild animal. That's where the muscle tension comes from, and the heart rate increase and the breathing getting more shallow. The body's actually preparing to run to save your life. So anything that would be in that vein, I think is natural. Maybe that's physical exercise, maybe that's creative expression, maybe that's really feeling like you're able to express yourself emotionally via writing, that sort of
Mhm.
thing.
My favorite is windows down in the car, blast whatever screamiest screamo song I need to scream along to, and that's my creative expression release. So, yeah, all those good tips.
But anything also that really helps you get in touch with what your body's doing, because a lot of the parts, yeah, sure, if you're in the middle of meditation, you might have like an image show up of like, oh, there's a classroom or something like that. They're like all sitting there, but like a lot of times it really is just like, okay, what is my body doing right now, and what is that trying to tell me? Like, oh, okay, I didn't think I was anxious, but my breathing just changed. Maybe that's something to get curious about. Maybe that's something to sit with or kind of check in with periodically and really ask yourself, like, okay, is that something that needs more attention from people? And that's kind of like that parts work that the more you check in during the day, the more ongoing relationship you might have to those reactions.
What a good summary. Just being more present with yourself can help you tune in to, like, caring for yourself, it sounds like. Okay. Mm,
Yeah.
mm. I'm sure we could spend, like, 5 more days talking about just this stuff, but we only have so much time here. So, is there anything we haven't covered in attachment trauma work or parts work that you really want the audience to either know about or to, like, just give them a place of, like, a direction to go, maybe research on their own? But anything else we haven't covered?
Oh, I think way back, like maybe in the first couple minutes of this, you asked me why I do this work.
Yeah.
I breezed past that, I guess.
How is it that you got connected, like, specifically with, parts work, attachment trauma, and, specifically in these, I would say, more marginalized communities that they may not get as much support for compared to others?
Trying to put it all into like a boxes is kind of hard. I think for me, it's a response to something that I couldn't really personally find for myself when I was looking for therapists, like way back, where I've tended to be more of an intellectualizer. I still am, but I try to be more aware of what my body is doing and what my needs are and things like that. Um, but I would go into like a therapist's office and yeah, be able to tell them that, yeah, here's all my stuff. Here's the stone-faced list of every bad thing that's ever happened to me. Like, "Oh, yeah, you must be fine." It's like, "Well, no, I'm not feeling any of it." And I found that especially as a person from some of these communities. So I am a queer and non-monogamous and a kink practitioner myself. Sometimes trying to explain some of my dynamics and interactions and relationship difficulties to people would be traumatizing to a certain extent, where just trying to explain the the level of difficulty I was having or how my stuff was getting triggered and in a way that sometimes a therapist would be like, well, are you sure you wanna do that?
I was just talking to a consult who had the same experience. It's like
Yeah.
questioning you. It's like, doubting you or, like, invalidating the freaking life you wanna have. Like, just because it's difficult doesn't mean I don't want it. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
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 So,
Yeah.
that happened.
Yeah. And I am also someone who has experienced significant relational trauma going back to childhood. So it's really important for me to be able to do that work in a way that understands that there's a difference between those things. Like I could be non-monogamous and have some really complex and sometimes very difficult relationship interactions as an adult, and also have relationship trauma. And one is not caused by the other. They're just two things that I probably would need someone to be at least familiar with, at least open to working with in a way that honors different I have.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is really close to your heart. I mean, you do this because this is what you were also searching for and what you saw that was missing a lot for these communities, it sounds like. I thank you so much for doing this work. I don't think there's enough of us out here, but I think it is growing. Like I see more and more every day that there were more practitioners getting trained and educated and just like softening the edges. So, there's hope, I think. Fingers crossed.
I think so. I think we're seeing a lot of that, honestly, and it's been really cool to see that in LGBTQ plus work as well, which I think in general therapists are moving in the right direction on, and learning more about like, well, there are a lot of different ways to be a person, to structure your relationship and your lifestyle and interact with people.
Yeah. I believe that wholeheartedly. I mean, that's why I do this shit. Like, why why do we need to succumb to what society has planned for us or the expectations of all these outside sources? So, I won't get on that soapbox because I can feel the anger in my body already, and I just wanna release that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, thank you for speaking on all of this. Before I have you talk about like where people can find you, can you recommend any particular books, people to follow, or just other resources so people can learn a little bit more about parts work or even attachment trauma that you always love recommending maybe your own clients?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I used to recommend the book Attached, which is still pretty solid as basis on attachment trauma, but the clients that I see are mostly non-monogamous people. So I really like just Vern's books. Just I recommend that. Even if you're not non-monogamous, I think it's just a probably the best depiction I've ever seen of like attachment theory plus the trauma piece, Polysecure, and then also the Polysecure workbook, and then Polywise, which is specifically on like conflict resolution in non-monogamous relationships. I just love it. And then also work in internal family systems. I would start with No Bad Parts, the Dick Schwartz. It's a really good introduction to the model and to the way that people are using this. Um, I'm still learning the model myself, so hopefully, like I've explained it in a way, but like read more on it. It's really cool, and it's a great way to develop that better relationship internally. There is a good collection of like scripts or guided journal meditation type stuff called I saved it. It was daily the daily parts meditation practice, a journey of embodied integration for clients and therapists. And it has a lot of like meditations in there. There's a lot of home practice type stuff you can do with that. Also, if you go on the Insight Meditation Timer, there's a lot of people doing guided parts work meditations there. And then if anyone's interested in more on like the complex trauma piece, which a lot of times that's what your attachment trauma is, your developmental stuff is going to be complex. I'd really recommend Errol Schwartz. So she's a psychologist who also is a yoga teacher and does a lot with trauma and integrating that with parts work perspective. So there's the complex trauma workbook, and then there's a couple manuals, and then some just really good stuff on yoga as well. I think that probably covers most of it. Oh, from the clinical side, this idea of of there being like
Mm-hmm.
that the stress responses will kind of map onto parts and those ones that I mentioned. Anything by Gina Fisher. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. With the J, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, man, you really gave a comprehensive direction of where people can go to go learn more. I love that. Thank you so much. But if people want to learn more about you, where can they find you or the stuff that you're doing? Or if they are like, man, this podcast was really good. I think they can get me. I want to go see Serena and be a client. Where can they find you and what are you up to?
Yeah. Yeah. My website is probably the best place to do that. It's her.com. I have a free 15-minute individual consultation that anyone can request on there. I am also kind of a side project, but tangential to some of the things that we've been talking about. I do have an education business where we talk a lot about non-monogamy and LGBTQ plus scenes, specifically for therapists. Right now, we're working on some educational content for therapists, but I want to expand that into maybe some guides about like, all right, how do I open up a relationship, or how do I work on some of this attachment trauma stuff? And that is the platform is called Expansive Education.
Yay, awesome. And I'm so glad that you are expanding into like educating therapists, but also like even more so just like everybody in the broader sense. But I'm really excited to learn more from you and can't wait to see more of your CEU. So thank you so much for hanging out with me for the past hour. I appreciate you letting me just like pick your brain and learn all about this stuff. It's riveting to me. So everyone listening, I hope you really enjoyed this podcast and I appreciate your time, Serena.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I've had a great time talking about this stuff and just geeking out about it.
Sweet. All right, y'all. I will have all of the important links in the show notes so you can learn more or go find Serena, and I'll catch you on the next one. See ya. That's a wrap for today's episode of Stubborn Love. I hope you gathered some wisdom to bring into your love life and improve your relationships. If you enjoyed today's chat, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. That'll help this episode reach even more listeners. If you have any questions or stories you would like me to cover in the future episodes, drop me a message. I love hearing from you. If you need extra support in your relationships, check out how we might be able to work together by hopping on my website at pagebond.com. Until next time, don't let being stubborn keep you from secure love. Catch you in the next episode.